tasso. So we return to this chapter on the Mahayana taking of refuge and then Bodhicitta. As I was reading through the rest of it, it just struck me how condensed this is. He's put in an enormous amount in this one relatively brief chapter. And as I was reading through it, I saw my first impulse was, I'm embarrassed to say this, how quickly can we get through this so we can get onto the good stuff? You see the egg all over my face? It's there. It's an old habit. It's an old habit. Get on to get on with it. Let's get to the main practice. This is still preliminaries, right? We've only got read one sentence of Panchen Rinpoche. Come on. We've heard about Bodhicitta already. Let's get on with it. And then I recall just over the last few months, reading up, I don't know quite, must have been on the internet, it's where I look for most of my media information. But it was the first personal encounter between His Holiness Dalai Lama and one of the great beings of the 20th century within the Tibetan tradition, Kuno Lama Rinpoche. And he was a layperson, was Indian, born in the northern India, in the Kunu region, Kuno Lama Rinpoche. And he traveled to Tibet. I don't remember the details of his life story, but the core there, he traveled to Tibet, he studied extensively, he practiced. He also studied Sanskrit. He really drew from his own native culture of India and then combined that with his adopted culture of Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism. But he utterly focused as the centerpiece of his entire practice on Bodhicitta. He wrote a whole book that's just all in praise of Bodhicitta. I have it in Tibetan. And it was translated actually into English. And so that was his practice, Bodhicitta. I'm sure he did other practices, but that was actually central. I've known about that for a long time. But what I wasn't aware of is, and I also knew that His Holiness Dalai Lama looked to him for his primary transmission on the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. He received it from the lineage of Patra Rinpoche, quite an extraordinary lineage. But what really moved me when I was reading this kind of brief account of their interrelationship was, I think it was the first time, and if I make a mistake, please correct me, feel happy to correct me. But I think it was their first encounter. It was outside, it was in a public setting, and His Holiness saw Kuno Lama Rinpoche, knowing about him, knowing really who this person was. And His Holiness, in this very public setting, walked up to him and offered 3 prostrations. Yeah. And then Kuno Lama, and then Kuno Lama Rinpoche, of course, then offered 3 prostrations. His Holiness doesn't do that very often. He has many great teachers. And, in the receiving teachings, he'll prostrate, but they're his teachers. This is a person, he was down. Wow. That is really something. So, Kuno Lama Rinpoche, this whole practice was a Bodhicitta. So not something to skip through quickly. But a tiny note on the practice we've just finished. There's this theme that just crops up everywhere. And it's development and discovery. Development and discovery. This is karuna bhavana, cultivation of compassion. And it's a good translation, it's a good word. And we are cultivating. And that is, when we start practice, we may feel we're not very rich in empathy and not very rich in compassion. We continue the practice, and then it just starts to rise more easily, more deeply, more spontaneously. And these are the undercurrents. On the surface we may feel, I'm not making progress, I'm not doing this, not doing that. But when you just find that compassion is arising more spontaneously than it did before, then these are the undercurrents. There's movement down below. There's definitely maturation taking place. There is transformation taking place. And so cultivating it, that which seemed to be missing or quite meager, starts to become more bountiful, deeper, stronger, more frequent, more spontaneous. On the one hand. On the other hand, there's this other element that, frankly, I didn't really learn about until I've been studying and practicing for 20 years. And that is the theme coming out, especially out of the Mahamudra and especially the Dzogchen tradition, of Buddha nature being more than potentiality, more than a potentiality. But actually an actuality here and now, And as Dujum Lingpa, the great 19th century Dzogchen master, said, when you tap into Rigpa, when you gain some experience of Rigpa, insight, identification of your own pristine awareness, that is ultimate bodhicitta. Your Buddha nature, Dharmakaya, primordial consciousness, Tathagata Garbha, that is ultimate Buddha nature, ultimate bodhicitta. And once you tap into that, do not look elsewhere for bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta, because it springs from the ultimate. It is derivative. The relative bodhicitta, the aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings, it's a spontaneous outflow of tapping into ultimate bodhicitta. So he almost gets a little bit ironic or chuckles. Don't think you need to look elsewhere. I mean, you've hit the mother lode. This is where it comes from. You cultivate to bring it from there. You're not conjuring it up out of thoughts and images and the activities of your intellect. You're using all of those, what we just did, to unveil the inner resources of compassion that are already there, that are in the very nature of your own Buddha nature. So the practice can be seen authentically, accurately in complementary ways. On the one hand, from the perspective of a sentient being's mind, we are cultivating compassion. From the perspective of Rigpa, we are unveiling the compassion that is already there. So I made rather quick work of the taking refuge yesterday. I don't want to linger there long. Actually, a little bit eager now to get on to Bodhicitta. But it is very significant here that the taking of refuge is not simply a very meaningful ritual, a liturgy. It's not simply the taking of refuge, taking the vows of refuge. It's not simply an expression and a sustaining of trust, of taking refuge, but it also entails these vows of refuge. And you can read them, they are quite clear. But it's also quite clear, as I'm looking down at them on the page of 21, if one really takes this to heart, and you're just turning all that is good in your life, starting with your meals, and just offering that up. And in offering, of course, you're releasing all attachment. Offering that up. You may offer your family up. Doesn't mean you leave home, but you're offering my family, my home, my possessions. I just offer it all up. All dedicated to Dharma. That would be quite revolutionary. To be frequently practicing refuge by recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, that would be revolutionary. And so we see this, the first, the second, and the third. So these practices, and then so basically it's practicing Dharma. I mean, it's not just this vow, this vow, this vow, but if one is placing one's trust in the Buddha, in the Dharma that he revealed and the path, then of course you express that trust by doing your very best to practice Dharma. That's pretty simple. Otherwise it kind of doesn't mean anything. But I think that simple point, that you're really having taken refuge and you say, all right, well this is going to be an absolutely central feature of my life from now until enlightenment, and we can boil that down to ethics, nonviolence and benevolence. We can boil that down to samadhi, the cultivation of exceptional mental balance, of well-being, the cultivation of wisdom. So that's what it's really all about. That refuge is in order to really completely dedicate yourself to the path to liberation and awakening. But I just wanted to kind of touch lightly on these 8 benefits of going for refuge. Because some of them, at least we should pause a little bit. The first one's kind of obvious. You've entered community. You've entered a community. You now have a whole circle of friends. You have companions. You have fellow voyagers. You have a community. And to be aware of that, to embrace that, and to take your position in that community. Basis of all vows, quite clear. But now this next one, this one's interesting. All your previous sins, I don't use the word sin much anymore, but it's perfectly legitimate. It just has a lot of weight from Christianity, and some people find that unbearable. But it's still a good translation. Evils, misdeeds, unwholesome conduct, find the one that you feel comfortable with, but you know exactly what we're talking about. And so, but they're extinguished. All the previous are extinguished. Well, I think we need to pause here a little bit. Like, okay, now I have no more bad karma. All of the bad karma I've accumulated in all countless lives, that finished yesterday when I said, well done, or something to that effect, right? Well, not quite that simple. Not quite that simple. Because it implies, of course, if you're taking refuge, then you're following the path. If you're following the path, then very crucial to that is recognizing what are unwholesome deeds, harmful deeds of body, speech, and mind. What are they? And then, with your trust in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, then do the obvious, do what is needed to purify those imprints, to purify that karma. It doesn't, as the Buddha himself said, it doesn't happen just by him waving a magic wand or blessing you in some ways and getting rid of all your karma. I mean, it's so obvious, all schools of Buddhism recognize that. The Buddha could not have been more clear. And so, exactly how does that occur? Is it possible that all negative karma could be purified, extinguished? The answer is yeah. But then how? How does that occur? And so, just a brief reminder, this is old hat for many of you, maybe a new hat for some of you. But how is negative karma purified? We do something awful. We look back on it and we said, that was wrong. You know, it's good to learn about ethics, but there's also just a bottom line of we know what violence is, and we know what benevolence is. We know when we've acted in harmful ways. We can always learn more. We can finesse it. We can become more informed. We can overcome biases which we may have been brought up with. There have been biases throughout human history. There still are. So then we need something outside of our own culture to enlighten us to prejudices, biases within our culture. But when we clearly do recognize that something we've done is unwholesome, and we recognize that if those imprints, those seeds, if they are left on their own, they will germinate. They will have ramifications. Some of them will have ramifications, the consequences in this life. We won't like it. And when those seeds fully come to maturation, probably in future lives, sometimes in this life, we won't like that either. Then when we reflect upon the consequences of unwholesome deeds, then the natural thing, it's basically common sense thing, is to feel an authentic, reality-based, wholesome sense of regret. Regret. Again, we could spend the whole afternoon on this. I want to move through it pretty quickly. There's really good material there. It's all over the internet. I checked this afternoon. There's plenty of good material. Bhikshuni Thupten Chodron has a very good blog. Alex Berzin is always good. There's a Chinese Buddhist website. Very good, very good. So there's plenty of information. But just to run through it briefly, because for this to make sense, for this to be true, you have to know about this and practice it. If you just say, oh, thank you, Buddha, thanks a million. I'm so glad that you purified all my negative imprints. Well, it's silly. It's not true. And so to look upon those deeds of the past, it could be early past, it could be this morning, and look upon it with regret, with the awareness that this does give rise to harmful consequences. I picked this off the Chinese website, and I'm going to send it out. This is a really good snippet, and it's from Chinese Buddhist source. But it's a source of intelligent regret, not guilt, as the person who crafted this website, Patchett, said. It's very good. And it's a very positive and creative mental state aimed at correcting the mistake so we won't repeat it. I couldn't say that better myself. This is really spot on. You know, I love to see that when Dharma is very well portrayed in this public context. And then, so there's the first step, power of reliance. I'm just going to read this. I don't think I can do any better. The power of reliance is to correct our mistakes or negative actions directed towards either the four jewels, that would include the Guru, or other sentient beings, and then correspondingly, if we somehow engage in some improper, unwholesome action towards the four jewels, we take refuge. If our harmful behavior has been directed towards sentient beings, we generate bodhicitta. We rely on the Buddha, who is our role model, the Dharma, that is the teachings of the Buddha and the Sangha. Well said. That's the power of reliance. The third, the power of the remedy or the antidote. These are positive actions of body, speech, and mind that we do to purify the negativity. So it's kind of like matter, antimatter. If you have some matter and you want to obliterate it, bring in some antimatter. They vanish, they extinguish each other. They're gone. So this is building the wall of good karma. This can include kind deeds, chanting mantras, Vajrasattva mantra, and so forth, meditation, cultivating compassion, and the dedication of merit of what we've done to help anyone we may have harmed. Beautifully said. I mean, really spot on. This is what makes this comes true. And then absolutely crucially is the fourth one, the power of resolve. The translations are really good too. This is our ongoing determination never to repeat the negative action and then not doing it. So, just bravo. I love to see Dharma well articulated, and that is superbly well articulated. That's how this happens. That by receiving the teachings of the Buddha, learning how to purify these negative imprints, past karma, then they can be indeed all freed. But the next one really is a moment to pause. You accomplish everything you intend. Okay, well in that case, let's all go out and buy lottery tickets. Collectively, let's just find the biggest lottery ticket and we'll collectively buy it and we're going to cash in. Because Karma Chagmé, he knows what he's talking about. I intend to win the lottery. You know. Just by the way, I love this when I heard about it. We had a great big one a while back in America. That was hundreds of millions. And I saw a statistic that the chances of winning that lottery were the same as being eaten by a shark and struck by lightning at the same time. So, it's possible. It's about that big. Right. So clearly this can be silly. But then this is not a silly man writing it. It comes from deep sources. So let's just linger there a moment. You accomplish everything you intend. Well, of course, I'm talking about intentions in Dharma. It can't be hedonia. For the obvious fact that it's been known throughout all of human history, bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. And it has happened, is happening, it's going to happen again. You know, the fact that you're very virtuous, you may be saintly, you may be a great sage. Oh, there were many great lamas that were tortured to death in Tibet, just for starters, you know, and so many other cases. So let's not be silly. But involved in this taking of refuge, it really is kind of a revolution. It's a reorienting of one's whole way of viewing reality, one's priorities, one's way of life. If that doesn't happen, then the refuge never really took place. It was simply a ceremony that came and went. But if there's the carry-through from just that, of truly taking refuge and continuing in it, that means you're devoting yourself to practice, which means you're prioritizing dharma over the pursuit of hedonic pleasure, the cultivation of eudaimonia over the pursuit of hedonia, and there's going to be a major shift takes place over time, or sometimes quite suddenly, in what are your aspirations? What are your aspirations? Right? And insofar as they're hedonic, then good luck. Good luck, yeah? Because within the context of this life, there's just no telling. Unless you're clairvoyant, there's just no telling. I know people who are extremely well educated and very intelligent, and they just fail and fail and fail. I've seen that happen. And other people, they're just dumb luck, or they're just gifted, or just great things happen to them, you know. There's no predicting it. So for hedonia, it really is the great casino of samsara. You know, there's just no telling who's going to be succeeding in the hedonic pursuits. Who's going to get rich, famous, powerful, and so forth, succeed in a myriad of ways? Who's going to live a long life and be really healthy? And so on. There's no way of telling. Within the context of this life, you can say it's just dumb chance, or if you take the big picture, okay, karma, but then who knows what the karma is? So that's not in our control. What happens to us is not in our control. But the cultivation of eudaimonia, that's something where we can actually get in the driver's seat. Priorities start to shift. They shift. Motivations arise, renunciation, bodhicitta. And insofar as the intentions align with reality, that they are authentic intention. That's one of the Eightfold Noble Path. Authentic intention. Right up there with authentic view. Authentic intention. Insofar as authentic intentions arise, that are rooted in reality and actually will give rise to the happiness you seek for yourself and others as you carry through with them. It's at that moment, as we bring an authentic intention to reality, that reality rises up to meet us. If we bring an inauthentic intention to reality, good luck. There's just no telling. There's just no telling. Good luck. But it's the tango. It's that tango, call it whatever you like, a dance. It's that interaction. It's that participation. There's a reciprocity there. And if we rise to it, then reality rises to us. If we don't, we have good days and bad days, lucky days and unlucky days. And so that's what he's really talking about, I think, is your motivations start to become deeper, more authentic. And you can speak more generically, more impersonally, of reality rising up to meet you. I've told so many times, I can say it in one sentence, but when I was 21, really needed a teacher, it took 4 hours before the delivery man came. You know, that was fast. If you haven't heard the story, you'll find it in the podcast someplace. But it was so sincere, it was genuine. I really wanted a teacher. And 4 or 5 hours later, there he was, you know. And we made in contact for decades after that. And then one thing led to another, and to another, and to another. That really caught my attention. That the chances of that happening just out of sheer accident, and then the next thing happening out of sheer accident, and the next one, and the next one. After a while you say, come on, let's be realistic here. This is too much. There is no explanatory power to say, oh, it's mere accident. You just start sounding stupid after a while. Like, are you not seeing this? You know? And if I were alone, that I say, wow, I must be somebody really special. But of course I'm not. I've seen this in so many other cases. But it comes down to motivation again and again and again. It's always that. Yeah. So we can think of it impersonally in this way. It's fine. But it's also authentic to think of really receiving blessings. Receiving blessings from your guru, receiving blessings from your personal deity, that manifestation of the Buddha that speaks most closely to your heart, whether Tara, Guru, Rinpoche, whoever it may be. That actually really makes sense. That actually is very real. And it brings the warmth. The sense of trust, the sense of faith, of devotion really comes then. When you see that, you're not just believing it, but you see it. And I listen. You know, I'm on internet a lot with friends of mine, students of mine around the globe, and it just keeps on happening again and again. I've seen it so many times. The need is there, the sincerity, the purity of motivation, the prayer for blessings comes, and then lo and behold, you know, it happens. If it happened once or twice, I'd say, well, you know, good things happen on occasion. But when it happens consistently, then you think, wow, maybe there's really some very deep truth there. So you accomplish everything you intend. Your mind stream becomes endowed with great merit, true. You're not afflicted, I skipped one, you're not afflicted by human or non-human obstructive forces. You recall that there was a commentary I just cited very briefly. When karma is maturing, well, that's the time that the force is there, it's going to play itself out. But there are many types of forces, adversities, sufferings, and so forth that are not a maturation of karma. So I cited that there are now more obese people than people who are underweight. Well, everybody who's even literate knows that if you're obese, it has major health disadvantages. So if you suffer diabetes and heart, you know, hypertension and so forth and so on, because you're terribly overweight, is your diabetes and hypertension, is that because of past karma, some negative karma you accumulated in the past life? Come on. No. It's because you're fat, stupid. You know, I don't mean to be, I'm not denigrating anybody. People are obese or people like, you know, it's a problem. But it's not an inevitable problem. It's not something that just happens to us out of the blue, you know. And so, no, there are many things we do in this life. It's not karma. Eat rotten food, you get diarrhea. That's not karma. It was rotten food. Insult somebody and they retaliate. That's not karma. They don't like what you said. They're getting back at you. That's not karma. You can see it happen right here, right? And so there are a lot of things we're doing in this life that have repercussions, good and bad. And there are negative things that could happen to us. And they may be averted by taking refuge. Yeah. So that's what he's getting at there. And you do not descend to miserable states of existence? Well, yeah. We've all done negative things in the past, but if you purify it, then you've burnt the seeds of that which would throw you down. So it's not just the Buddha rescuing you and saving you from the pits. He's shown you the way with the Dharma, and then you purify those seeds that might throw you down. And then you swiftly, manifestly achieve perfect enlightenment. Good. So that's a bit of commentary to that. And now we move to Bodhicitta with 10 minutes to go. But we're not going to go very far. I just felt this is not something to rush through. And in the Buddhist studies, and I know and I went to the American Academy of Religion national annual conference and so forth. So I knew the scene. I was there as a graduate student 6 years and as a lecturer for 4. And something very common, it's just everywhere in Buddhist studies, and I'm sure it's elsewhere, is when you're writing your dissertation, you're writing a paper, you find something really gnarly, something tough, something that's really challenging, like that. Show me the academic paper on loving kindness. Boring. I understand that. Why would I write a paper about loving kindness? Everybody knows that. How about the difference between the Svatantrika Madhyamaka and the Prasangika Madhyamaka, and exactly what is the object to be negated? Now that I can get my teeth into. Maybe I can even get tenure, or at least get published, so I don't perish. So that tends to be the tendency, is to go for that tough side, the part that really challenges the intellect and so forth. Shamatha is widely ignored. I mean, I haven't. I did my dissertation on Shamatha, but I was the only one. I don't think anybody else had. Shamatha, that's easy. 9 stages, blah, blah, blah. Where's the mystery of that? That's not interesting. Next. And we're looking for something gnarly, Well, 7-point mind training, how many dissertations are there on the 7-point mind training? And as in academia, I'm not putting down academia, that's just how it works. It's not a criticism, it's just how it works. And you won't probably get your dissertation accepted if you write something that's, from your heart. That's not what they do. They write from up here. And I coming from a Christian background, if you look for loving kindness, compassion, and so forth in Christianity, well, just throw a rock in any direction. It's everywhere. There are examples, embodiments of it, great beings who embody loving kindness, compassion. There are teachings on it that are splendid, that are deep. So, there's plenty of that there. So when I went to Buddhism, I was looking for something I hadn't seen before. And then I'm looking for Shamatha, I'm looking for Vipashyana, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, stage regeneration, Tantra, stuff that wasn't part of my last repertoire. So, but that all suggests kind of a bias. We come back to Bodhicitta. But let's see if we can approach it. I'm going to do this right now. Approach it as if for the first time. Why not? So, Karma Chagmé, this great scholar, great being, great adept, great teacher, great writer too. He said, now I shall discuss the generation of the Mahayana aspiration. Generally, in terms of aspirations, there are Hinayana and Mahayana aspirations. I've clarified that point, so I don't need to do it again. It's not about this school and that school. It's about what's your motivation. And you are a follower of the Hinayana if, as in the case, the first is the generation of the aspiration for enlightenment for the sake of your own peace and happiness, which relatively speaking entails a small-scale path. And really, let's not be too quick to deprecate that. If you're suffering, what's more natural than want to stop suffering? And what's wrong with that? And if you see internally, I'm perpetuating my own suffering with my own delusion, craving, and hostility, what's wrong with wanting to be free as quickly as possible? And frankly, I have my answer to that is I don't see anything wrong with that at all. But for the moment, what we attend to is reality. And what I'm attending to, what I'm fixated on, is my suffering and my causes of suffering and my freedom. Well, what am I not attending to? Everybody else's. And if I existed independently, there might be some rationale for that. But if I don't, I find it hard to find a rationale for that. So in the Sravagayana context, I'll use that because it's not Theravada or Savastivada, and it's not any historical school, Sravagayana. It's in the abstract. And again, you could be calling yourself a Vajrayana practitioner and wear a big hat and have a great big bell and Vajra, and know all the rituals, and you may be a complete Shravaka, following the Sravagayana. If it's all about you, then that's it. So he's not talking about a sectarian issue here. So there's two. And in that Shravagayana context, if you ask, and this is a true statement, I've seen it, if you ask, why are you cultivating the four immeasurables? What's the primary purpose in the context of Sravakayana? Or, historical context of that, Theravada. It's true, I've seen it in Theravada literature. It is one historical school that bears much in common with Sravakayana. Why are you cultivating the four immeasurables, or the four Brahma Viharas? Why are you doing that? And the answer is, in that context, so that I can purify my mind and achieve liberation quickly. Because insofar as I feel an unevenness, I've seen this. It's not a deprecation, but that's why you do it. Because you are, after all, seeking your own liberation to become liberated and never return to samsara. That's the idea, right? But insofar as my mind is bumpy, uneven, that is, I really like some people, I care for some people, but don't care for others. I feel compassionate for these really poor people over here, but these victimizers, can't stand those people. I take empathetic joy in the good people, but not for those nasty people, and equanimity is nowhere to be found. Then if that's my modus operandi, and I'm practicing Shamatha Vipashyana, those are going to provide major, major obstacles. I will not be free. So if I want to be free, I need to level that out, all out. Level that out. Level out attachment and aversion, so they can cut to the root of delusion and be free. So, true statement. Because again, the unavoidable fact is, if one is following Sravakayana, you're doing so to achieve liberation and never come back. For the upside of that, it's good not to be suffering. Downside of that, you have left everybody else behind. So in this regard, it's not bad. It's just small scale. It's limited. That's what Hinna means. It's just lesser compared to something greater. It is said that the aspirations of the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas are fundamental obstacles to the attainment of enlightenment, the enlightenment of a Buddha. They're not obstacles to achieving the liberation of a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddhahood. And the Pratyeka Buddha, of course, is simply someone who's following a path with the aspiration that in their final life, in the lifetime in which they achieve liberation, they will do so without reliance upon any other human teacher. They will be solitary realizers. That's the aspiration. And there are historical cases of that, and there are many historical cases of Shravaka Arhats. But if that's your focus, if that's your aspiration, that's your intention, this is all about my becoming free. And everybody else has, that opportunity too. If I can help you, I will, but this is what I can do. This is possible, and that is my liberation is possible, and I'm focusing on that. Then insofar as it is focused on one's own peace and happiness, then that's going to obstruct the emergence of an aspiration that is embracing all sentient beings in one's motivation. And then, another quote, devoid of skillful means and lacking wisdom, you descend to the level of Shravakas. Okay? Skillful means is Bodhicitta, above all, and lacking the wisdom of emptiness, lacking the wisdom of the profound interdependence, the pratitya samutpada, nature of all beings. And lacking that, then you may regard yourself. And there's an irony here. On the one hand, you are striving for your own peace and happiness. On the other hand, the person for whom you're striving has no self-existence. It's ironic. But it is possible. Intellectually, it sounds like that's a conundrum. Practically, it does happen. I know people, I have had the very good fortune to correspond with some of the leading Theravada scholars. Bhikkhu Bodhi is outstanding. But there are others I've corresponded with as well. I won't list the names, but they're really, really good. It's my privilege to have correspondence with them. I respect each one of them. They're fine practitioners. And it was one of them, I'll just leave his name anonymous, but he comments that among his fellow Theravada monastic scholar peers and friends, there are some who envision, and they articulate this, if they defend this, that when an arhat dies, one achieves arhatships, achieves nirvana, and then you die, you become an arhat without remainder. There are those very intelligent, well-informed, knowledgeable Theravada scholars, some today, that say, look, the Buddha said that the continua of your five skandhas is cut. Not only your body, but your mind and consciousness itself, including mental consciousness. The continuum of all five skandhas is terminated forever. That's what it says. There's no wiggle room there. When the arhat dies, the continuum of these conditioned 5 skandhas is terminated forever, right? And so there are those who, and the Buddha doesn't refer to, in the Pali Canon, any dimension of consciousness that lingers on afterwards. There's no reference to that anywhere. And I've spoken with world-class, they all agree. There is no reference in the Pali Canon to some dimension or continuum of consciousness that carries on individually after an arhat has died. Nowhere to be found. They would know it. I wouldn't. But these people are really first-rate scholars. I'm not. I'm not a scholar at all. I just look on the outside. And so there are those who then therefore conclude, when an arhat dies, the arhat becomes annihilated. They're called annihilationists, because they figure that's the final outcome. You have some years, months, days, whatever, after you've achieved nirvana, and before you die, enjoy it while it lasts. But then when you're dead as a doornail. And as if there's just, deader than a doornail. At least a doornail is a doornail. You're not anything at all. You become nothing, right? And so my correspondent, I could mention his name, there's nothing wrong with it, but I'll keep it anonymous. He said, I disagree with that. And he's a really good scholar, and he gives sources. This is why, when the Buddha refers to nirvana, it's not just cessation. He speaks of it in positive terms. And so how then could it just be sheer annihilation? So, but there are then annihilationists, and then there are others. But then, when I address my learned colleague and friend, whom I've never met, but we've corresponded over the years, I said, but what is your assertion then? If you're not an annihilationist, then what do you posit? Continues on. And he said, I can't say. The Buddha doesn't say. And that's legitimate. I have nothing to criticize there. This topic is addressed in the Mahayana. And so, that's what he's getting at here. So they, the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, they may attain the states of enlightenment corresponding to their own paths, the culmination of the Shravaka path, the Pratyeka Buddha path, but they cannot achieve ultimate enlightenment. You cannot achieve the enlightenment of a Buddha with the intention to achieve liberation just for yourself. It won't happen. So here it is necessary to strive to generate the Mahayana aspiration. If you wish to become a Buddha, you will not succeed if your motivation is, I want to achieve Buddhahood, perfect enlightenment, because it sounds really, really good and I want it. For me, that won't be enough. You can be practicing all the 6 perfections, but they won't be 6 perfections if it's motivated by still a self-centered motivation. So, we'll pause there. But this is why he, finished the whole path, and then he came back, and this is the first topic he addressed. This is worth lingering on. And happily, Glenn is here. As you can see, it's 6 o'clock now, so once again, no time for discussion this afternoon. But Glenn is very knowledgeable. I'm sure there are others here as well, but Glenn, I know, is very knowledgeable. And this is bound to raise questions. If you're very familiar with it, you say, oh yeah, this is all familiar, cool. But if you're not, and questions arise, we're not here to indoctrinate anybody, but if you'd like to have greater clarification about this, qualms arise, then Glenn has kindly offered to have question and answer session. Was it one or twice a week? 3 times a week. Oh, mazel tov. 3 times a week. And he's very knowledgeable. He's a person you can rely on. I'm sure if Glenn doesn't know the answer, he's going to say, I don't know. I love saying that. I really do. Because there's one point where I just feel I'm invulnerable. If I say I don't know, go ahead and refute me. Knock yourself out. Go ahead, try. You don't stand a chance. I've won the debate already. I am ignorant, and I stand my ground. And so there we are. So if Glenn doesn't know the answer, then he will tell you. If it comes back to me, and I don't know the answer, I'll tell you that as well. But then I maybe can refer you, because I know people much more erudite and wiser than I am. Okay? So very good. Very good. But so as we'll see in the coming pages, just a sneak preview, he's addressing something that is relevant to every person here. And that is even for those of you, to some extent those of us, who have the good fortune in the near future to be able to go off to, for months, maybe longer, in full-time retreat. That's a wonderful opportunity. For most people listening by podcast, for most of us here, that's not what reality is dishing up on May 25th, right? Another way of life. And what he's getting at here is really this may be the most important chapter of anything we do for the next 8 weeks, for what comes after this retreat. And that is, and he cites a letter to a king, or teachings to a king, who has a lot of responsibilities. And he must fulfill them, otherwise he should really step down. And so if you have many responsibilities in life, and you have very little time for the cushion, sitting quietly in your room, shamatha, vipashyana, what have you, if you have many responsibilities that you, like a very good king, find meaningful, that you embrace, you do not accept it grudgingly. You're taking care of your children. I don't think that's grudgingly, and so forth. Then how can you authentically embrace a view and a way of life that gives you the sense, rooted in reality, that your practice is every bit as dedicated, as full-time, and potentially as transformative as a person who's living in total solitude, engaging in full-time solitary practice? How could there be a complete parity between those two? And possibly, of course, you might be actually more transformative, because there's no guarantee going to solitude is going to bring a bounty of transformation. There's no guarantee at all. And so, in that big topic, that's already in the minds of some of you, it should be in the minds of all of us. How can I see that there's just this complete saturation of my life with Dharma when I leave this retreat? During the retreat, it's kind of like, well, there's nothing else to do here anyway. So it's kind of easy. But when there are many demands on our time, responsibilities and so forth, how can we have that sense, today I just lived in Dharma all day, and tomorrow I wake up in the morning and I've just entered into the stream of Dharma and I just swim in that stream all day, and day after day, it's as if you're in full retreat, but you're fully present in the world. How can that be something that is not just lip service and saying, oh, my life is Dharma, which is so easy to say? And he gives us a clue right here. Bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. He makes it, that's just a word, but he really unpacks it to show how this can be real. I don't believe Kuno Lama Rinpoche. I don't know much about his life, but I don't think he went off for years and years of retreat. Don't think so. Outstanding scholar, great being, great teacher, great scholar, great teacher of the Bodhicharvatara to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Whew. Don't think he spent much time in retreat. That's pretty impressive. So he must have taken what he had and so infused it that when His Holiness saw him, he prostrated. Wow. That really moved me when I read that. Oh, wow. That's something.